"You get $1,000, Dad." My son mocked me, convinced he would inherit the $8 million his mother had left behind. I just waited in silence. When the lawyer turned to the next page, his face went pale. I was standing in front of the mahogany coffin when I felt my son's hand pushing me aside. It was not a gentle touch, the kind you would expect at a funeral. It was deliberate, calculated, strong enough to make me stumble in the worn dress shoes I had owned for 20 years. "Move aside, Dad. You have played your part." Michael's voice cut through the murmur of condolences like a rusty razor. 67 years of life, 42 years of marriage. And this is how my only son treated me the day I buried Elizabeth. Right there in front of business executives in Italian suits, neighbors pretending not to see distant relatives who came more for the food than for the memories. I did not cry, not at that moment. I looked at the coffin where Elizabeth rested with that serene expression she never had in life, and I wondered if she knew if, from wherever she was, she could see the monster we had raised together, or rather the monster she had created, while I held together a home that never gave me credit. Tiffany, my daughter-in-law, was leaning against the back wall of the funeral home, in a black silk dress, neckline grazing the disrespectful for a memorial, service red acrylic nails like dried blood. She smiled when our eyes met. It was not a smile of comfort, it was a smile of victory. And in that exact moment, I understood. They had already divided everything. The inheritance, the properties, the cars, the bank accounts. Everything as if I were just an administrative hurdle to overcome. The room smelled of white lilies and hypocrisy. Those giant flowers Elizabeth hated, but that Michael insisted on ordering because they projected an image of success. 140 arrangements. I counted each one while people paraded with their empty condolences. "Your wife was an exemplary woman. William, exemplary." That word chased me all my life. Exemplary in the kitchen. Exemplary raising our son. Exemplary staying silent when Elizabeth came home at 3 a.m, smelling of wine and expensive cologne. But at that funeral, while my son pushed me aside and my daughter-in-law smiled, exemplary became synonymous with invisible. The service was fast. Elizabeth was not religious, so the minister was brief, professional, efficient, like someone checking off another task of the day. Michael gave the eulogy. He spoke of a visionary mother, a brilliant businesswoman, a woman who built an empire from nothing. He did not mention my name once, not when he listed the important persons in her life, not when he thanked everyone who supported her. 42 years erased in 12 minutes of rehearsed speech. When they lowered the coffin, Michael threw the first rose, Tiffany the second. They waited for me to approach, but not to comfort me, but to ensure I did not cause a scene. I walked slowly, feeling the weight of every gaze piercing my back. I threw a daisy. Elizabeth hated roses. At the exit of the cemetery, while people dispersed towards their imported cars, Michael caught up with me. He was accompanied by the family lawyer, Mr. Harrison. Harrison was a man with gray hair and thin glasses who always greeted me with a nod that seemed genuine. "Dad, tomorrow at 10 sharp. The reading of the will is happening. Do not be late." It was not an invitation. It was a summons. I spent that night alone in the house I had shared with Elizabeth since Michael was 3 years old. A house too big for one person, full of rooms that accumulated memories like dust. I sat in the living room armchair, the moss green velvet one I had bought at an antique shop in 1995, and let the silence swallow me. Was it worth it to be exemplary? If you want to know how a whole life of sacrifice can be erased in seconds, subscribe to the channel, because this story is just beginning, and what comes next will tear screams of indignation from your throat. Mr. Harrison's office was on the 12th floor of a mirrored building downtown, the kind that reflects the sky and makes you feel small just by looking at it. I arrived 15 minutes early, as I had done all my life. Punctuality was one of the few things my father taught me before dying. A man who respects himself makes no one wait. The receptionist, a young woman with hair too straight to be natural, offered me coffee. I accepted, but the cup shook so much in my hand that I had to leave it on the saucer. It was not fear, it was contained rage, the kind that ferments in the chest and rises up the throat like bile. Michael arrived 20 minutes late. He entered the office like someone invading conquered territory, broad shoulders occupying more space than necessary. Tiffany came behind him balancing on gold stilettos that clicked against the marble floor. She wore sunglasses inside the air-conditioned space as if she were still mourning or as if she wanted to hide her eyes from someone calculating every move. "Good morning, Dad." Michael's voice was mechanical, perfunctory, the kind you use with a bank teller. I did not answer. I just watched him as he threw himself onto the leather couch next to me, spreading his legs in a way that invaded my space. Tiffany sat on the other side, crossed her legs, and began scrolling on her phone. The glow of the screen illuminated her face in angles that made her look even more calculating. Mr. Harrison entered last, carrying a worn brown folder. He greeted me with a respectful nod. Then he looked at Michael with an expression I could not decipher at that moment. Today, looking back, I know exactly what it was. Pity mixed with contempt. "Well, let us begin." Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses and opened the folder with slow, almost ceremonial movements. The last will and testament of Elizabeth Hernandez registered before a notary on March 15th of this year, 3 months before her passing. 3 months! Elizabeth knew she was dying. The pancreatic cancer had come fast, but not without warning, and in those last 3 months she had made decisions. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and began to read. "I, Elizabeth Hernandez, in full use of my mental faculties, hereby declare as my last wishes." Michael was drumming his fingers on the table, an irritating and anxious rhythm, like someone waiting for a prize announcement. Tiffany lowered her phone and leaned forward, finally paying attention. "To my beloved husband, William, I leave the sum of $1,000 deposited in the checking account, as well as the residential property located on Oak Street." The world stopped. $1,000. Michael's laughter exploded like a gunshot in that glass-walled room, a loud and mocking laugh that made the receptionist outside lift her head. He hit the table with his hand so hard that the lawyer pen rolled to the floor. 1,000, 1,000. Michael turned to me, his eyes shining with that mixture of victory and cruelty that only an ungrateful son can have. "Dad, that does not even cover Tiffany manicure appointments. What the hell did you do to Mom? Head for her to leave you this misery." Tiffany let out a sharp giggle, covered her mouth with her red-nailed hand, and whispered something in Michael's ear. He laughed again. Mr. Harrison remained impassive, the paper still in his hand, as if waiting for the circus to end. I felt every word of that laughter penetrate my skin like shards of glass. $1,000. 42 years of marriage, of washing clothes, of preparing dinners for investors who barely recognized me, of holding Elizabeth hand during the nights when she woke up sweating over debts that almost led us to bankruptcy twice. It was all worth $1,000. The house, at least. She had left the house. And as for the rest of the estate? Michael did not even wait for Mr. Harrison to finish. He snatched the paper from the lawyer's hands with a rough movement. "Let me see this. Mr. Harrison, please." The lawyer tried to recover the document, but my son was already reading aloud, emotion dripping from every syllable. "To my son Michael, I leave the entirety of my commercial interests, stock holdings, commercial properties, financial investments, and vehicles for an estimated total estate value of $8 million. $8 million. Tiffany jumped and hugged Michael, screaming as if she had won the lottery. He lifted her off the floor, spinning with her in the middle of that mahogany and glass office. I remained seated, hands crossed over my synthetic leather briefcase, which I had carried for 8 years, watching my son celebrate as if I were not there, as if I had never existed. "Do you know what this means, my love?" Tiffany ran her hands over Michael's face, that shrill voice she used when she wanted something. We can buy that penthouse in Miami and change the car. I have always wanted a Mercedes convertible. You will have it." Michael kissed her neck right there in front of the lawyer and in front of me. "Everything you want, Princess. Everything." Mr. Harrison put away the papers slowly, meticulously, without looking at anyone. He closed the folder, adjusted his glasses, and finally raised his eyes to me. There was something in that look, a silent message I could not understand. "Mr. William, you will need to sign some documents to formalize the transfer of the house to your name. Can we schedule for next week?" Before I could answer, Michael interrupted. "Actually, counselor, about that house." He sat down again now with the posture of a businessman, someone used to making decisions. "How much is that property worth in the current market?" My stomach dropped. "It is a residence in a highly sought-after area, 5,000 square feet of land. I would say around $1.5 million. Mr. Harrison answered with a neutral voice. $1.5 million. Michael stroked his chin thoughtfully. Then he looked at me like someone evaluating an old object, needing to decide whether to keep or throw away. "Dad, do you not think it is a house too big for you? Alone at your age? What happens if something happens to you? Who is going to help you?" The concern in his voice was so fake it was offensive. "Michael is right, Dad." Tiffany approached. She touched my shoulder with those acrylic nails. I wanted to rip them off, one by one. "We could find you a smaller apartment, more practical, or maybe one of those communities for seniors. Some are really nice, you know, with nurses' activities. A nursing home." She was suggesting a nursing home. I looked at my son's face. I searched there for some trace of the boy I had rocked when he had colic. The one I taught to walk, to read, to tie his shoes. The boy who cried in my arms when the other kids at school excluded him. I searched for some spark of humanity. I found nothing, just the distorted reflection of a man who had learned from his mother that love is measured in dollars, and that I, in his eyes, was not worth more than 1,000. "I will think about it." My voice came out firm, surprising even myself. I got up from the armchair, grabbed my briefcase towards the door. Mr. Harrison accompanied me to the hallway. Before I entered the elevator, he leaned in and whispered, "William, do not sign anything without talking to me first. Nothing, do you understand?" I understand, but I still did not know why. I would only find out when it was too late for Michael to turn back. The days following the reading of the will were like living inside an emotional freezer. Michael did not call me again. Tiffany stopped pretending to be nice. It was as if I had officially become an item crossed off their priority list. But the house was still mine for now. I knew they would come back. People like Michael and Tiffany always come back when they want something. And the following Thursday, exactly at 11 in the morning, the doorbell rang with that insistent urgency of someone who does not accept being ignored. I opened the door and found myself face to face with both of them. Michael wore a charcoal gray suit I had never seen before, surely bought with the newly inherited money. Tiffany wore a beige linen outfit and carried an executive portfolio as if she were there for business. She was. "Hi, Dad. We need to talk." Michael entered without waiting for an invitation, his Italian leather shoes marking the hardwood floor I had waxed the day before. Tiffany followed him, her French perfume filling the air in a nauseating way. I closed the door slowly, mentally counting to 10, a technique I had learned from decades of swallowing insults. "Sit here, Dad. This is important." Michael pointed to the sofa, my sofa, as if he owned the house. I sat on the edge spine, straight hands in my lap. A posture my grandmother said belonged to a man who does not bend easily. Tiffany opened the portfolio and spread papers on the coffee table. Architectural plans, real estate appraisals, brochures of compact apartments in neighborhoods I had never heard of. "Look what we brought you." Her voice was too sweet, the kind of sweetness that precedes poison. Lovely apartments, furnished in complexes with 24-hour security. This one even has a recreation room for seniors. She pushed a colorful brochure towards me. A square building without personality, with tiny balconies and a pool the size of a bathtub. The kind of place where people go to disappear silently. We are thinking of your well-being. Dad. Michael leaned forward, elbows on his knees. That posture of someone about to make a generous offer. You would be much more comfortable in a smaller place, without stairs, without a garden to take care of, without maintenance worries. In this house? I asked, although I already knew the answer. Well, Michael exchanged a quick look with Tiffany. We were thinking of selling. The market is hot. It is the perfect time. With 1.5 million in the pocket, of course. And if I do not want to sell? My voice came out calm, almost curious. Michael's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Tiffany stopped browsing papers and looked at me with those calculating eyes. Dad, be reasonable. Her tone changed, became harder. You are 67 years old. You are alone. This house is huge, expensive to maintain. What happens if you fall? What happens if you get sick? Who is going to help you? I have neighbors. I have friends. Friends? Tiffany let out a dry giggle. Dad, with all due respect, most of your friends are already dead or in nursing homes. You need to be realistic. Every word was a polite slap. Michael sighed, ran his hand through his gelled hair, and changed strategy. He got up, began to walk around the living room, touching objects, as if he were taking inventory. He stopped in front of the rosewood sideboard that had belonged to my grandmother. These old things here. He knocked his knuckles against the dark wood, the sound resonating hollow. They are worth a fortune, you know. Authentic rosewood, probably 80 years old, $15,000. Easy money. My heart squeezed. That sideboard had belonged to Grandma Edith. It passed to my mother, then to me. I used to polish that wood every Sunday, conversing with the memories it kept. Technically, Dad. Michael turned to me, hands in his pockets. Everything inside this house belonged to Mom, and now belongs to me. The house is yours, but the contents, well, that is part of the estate. I felt the ground collapse under my feet. You cannot be serious. I am being practical. He shrugged, as if explaining basic math to a slow child. You do not need all these things, and I need to liquidate assets to invest in the business. Mom left the company, but working capital is tight. Tiffany got up. She ran her hand over the Austrian crystal chandelier in the dining room. This one here, for example, authentic crystal, 120 years old, should be worth about $2,000. We can sell it and buy you a modern lamp, much more practical. They were serious. They were going to empty my house, rip out every memory, every piece of history I had built. A team of appraisers is coming tomorrow. Michael was already heading to the door as if the matter was settled. They are going to catalog everything of value. Do not worry, Dad. We will not take your personal things, clothes, photos, that kind of stuff. You can keep those. How generous. Tiffany blew me a kiss in the air. That empty gesture people make when they want to seem affectionate without really touching the other person. Think carefully about the apartments, okay, Dad? We just want the best for you. And they left like that, leaving papers scattered on my table. The smell of expensive perfume in the air, and a black hole where a father heart should have been. I sat there in the silence heavy that settles after a storm. I looked at Grandma Edith sideboard the chandelier my mother had bought when she got married, the linen curtains she had sewn by hand 30 years ago. 42 years in that house. Every corner had a story. Every object was an anchor of memory. And my son wanted to liquidate everything, like clearance merchandise. It was then that the doorbell rang again. I got up slowly, legs shaking, expecting them to have returned to rip another piece of my dignity. But when I opened the door, I found Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor, with a pan of apple pie still warm in her hands. I saw those two leaving here with faces like vultures on the prowl. She entered without ceremony, put the pie on the kitchen table, and looked at me with those perceptive eyes of someone who had lived long and learned to read people. Tell me everything, William, and do not spare the details. And I told her. For the first time since Elizabeth died, I opened my mouth and let everything out. The humiliations, the $1,000 the plan to put me in a tiny apartment while they sold my life wholesale. Mrs. Patterson listened in silence, cutting generous slices of pie that neither of us touched. When I finished, she took off her glasses, cleaned the lenses with the hem of her blouse, and said the phrase that would change everything. William I was a lawyer for 40 years before retiring. And what your son is doing smells of coercion. Did you sign any power of attorney, any paper they gave you? No, not yet. Good. Do not sign anything, and give me the number of that Mr. Harrison right now. Mrs. Patterson took my phone and dialed. She spoke with the secretary. She identified herself as Attorney Carmen Patterson, legal advisor to Mr. William Hernandez. A half-truth she transformed into established fact, and demanded an urgent appointment. 20 minutes later, we were in her car, a 2010 Toyota Corolla, impeccably maintained, heading downtown. There is something very strange in this whole story, William. She tapped her fingers on the steering wheel, thinking, a woman like your Elizabeth does not leave her husband destitute like that, not after 42 years. Something was not said in that reading, and it was then that the first spark of hope lit up in the darkness. Maybe I was not as alone as Michael imagined. Maybe there was still a card up the sleeve that no one had played. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in the double bed that seemed too big without Elizabeth by my side, staring at the ceiling where a water stain formed the silhouette of a bird with spread wings. Elizabeth always said she would get it fixed. She never did. The memories came in waves, the kind you cannot control. 42 years pouring over me like cold rain at dawn. I met Elizabeth in 1983 at a college graduation party. I was 25 years old and in my third year of accounting, the first in my family to reach higher education. My mother took sewing jobs to pay my tuition. My father had died when I was 12, leaving nothing but debts and a gold watch my mother never took off. Elizabeth was just starting in real estate. She had a rusty blue Datsun 3 mended dresses and an ambition that did not fit inside her chest. She looked at me from the other side of the crowded dance floor and said the boldest thing I had ever heard. You are going to marry me. You do not know it yet, but you will. And I did 6 months later. A simple ceremony at St. Michael Church with a 1-tier cake and a dress borrowed from her cousin. My mother cried with joy. You did it, son. You caught a hard-working woman. What she did not know, what no one knew, was that I dropped out of school 2 weeks before the wedding. Elizabeth had secured a plot of land in partnership with another investor. She was going to build her first building. She needed help with the paperwork, with the calculations, with the basic architectural plans. Just until the development gets going, William, then you can go back to school. I never went back. 3 months after the wedding, I found out Elizabeth was pregnant with Michael. She opened a bottle of cheap wine and toasted to the man of the house. It never crossed her mind. It could be a girl. It was not. Michael arrived weighing 8 pounds red and screaming, crying every night as if he were angry about being born. Elizabeth's first development was a failure. Her partner disappeared with the money, leaving only debts and a labor lawsuit. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with 3-month-old Michael in my arms, giving him a bottle, while watching my wife cry, sitting on the floor of the empty living room. We had sold the furniture to pay lawyers. I failed William. I am a failure. I could have agreed. I could have gone back to my mother house, asked for help, gone back to school. But I looked at that broken woman on the floor and made the decision that would define the next 40 years of my life. Get up. You did not fail. You stumbled. Now get up and try again. And she got up. With my support, with the money I had secretly saved, with my grandmother jewels, that I sold without telling anyone, we managed to pay the most urgent debts. Elizabeth started over, this time alone. Small plots, cheap houses, tight profits. I took charge of Michael. The house, the bills, the taxes. I made the spreadsheets by hand. I checked every invoice. I negotiated payment terms with suppliers using that soft voice that disarms men used to shouting. When Michael started school, I began to work for real. I got up at 5 in the morning to prepare meals. I dropped the boy at school at 7. I spent the day in the improvised office we had set up in the guest room. I picked up Michael at 5 in the afternoon. I made dinner, helped with homework, put him to bed. And when I finally lay down, Elizabeth came home smelling of beer and exhaustion, wanting to talk about projects. I slept well maybe 10 times in those first 10 years. The first big turning point came in 1995. Elizabeth secured financing to build an 8-story building. It would be the biggest development until then. But halfway through construction, the contractor declared bankruptcy. Half the building finished, half the buyers wanting to back out. The bank threatening to foreclose. I remember sitting at that same kitchen table, 12-year-old Michael, playing video games in his room when Elizabeth said, "It is over, William. I'm going to have to file for bankruptcy." I was 37 years old, my hair starting to gray hands dry from washing dishes and doing laundry. No degree, no career, no money of my own. Just a ring on the finger and a son who already started looking at me with the same disdain I saw in his mother eyes. But I did not let Elizabeth give up. I called every individual buyer, 32 calls. I explained the situation. I promised we would finish. I asked for just 6 months more. 28 agreed, 4 backed out. But we found new buyers. I went to the bank alone. I used the house as collateral without telling Elizabeth. I got an extension and an additional loan. That building was delivered late, tight, with sleepless nights, but it was delivered. And the profit, $300,000 back then, a fortune, allowed Elizabeth to finally take off. She thanked me that night. She took me to dinner at an expensive restaurant. She took my hand over the table and said, "You are the foundation of everything, William. Without you, I am nothing." I believed her like a fool in love. I believed her. But Michael was listening. He was 12 years old, and he heard his mother say that. And do you know what he said on the way home? "Mom exaggerated, right, Dad? You just stay at home. She is the one who really works." Elizabeth laughed, ruffled the boy hair, and said, "Smart boy." She did not defend me. She did not correct him. She just laughed. And it was there in that car, returning home from the restaurant, that I understood. It did not matter how much I did. It did not matter how much I gave. I would always be invisible. The man in the background, the one who holds things up but does not shine. The following years were an escalation. Elizabeth built more buildings, bought more land, opened a real estate development company. Money began to flow, and the more it arrived, the less she was at home. Meetings, business dinners, trips to conferences. I stayed taking care of Michael, who became more arrogant by the day, taking care of a house that grew bigger and emptier, taking care of a loneliness that no expensive furniture could fill. When Michael turned 18, he announced he would study business administration. Elizabeth celebrated, already planning for her son to take the reins of the company. When I suggested he try architecture, my unrealized dream, Michael looked at me with pity. "Architecture is for artistic types, Dad. Real men do business." And Elizabeth agreed with a nod. My son graduated, joined his mother company, met Tiffany at a graduation party. She studied public relations, all groomed, all calculated. They married fast. Elizabeth paid for the wedding. 300 guests, seafood buffet, honeymoon in Paris. They did not consult me on anything. I just paid the bills, organized. The vendors chose the flowers. At the reception during the speech, Michael thanked his mother for everything she was. He did not mention my name. It was that night I understood I had raised a monster. Or rather, I had let Elizabeth raise a monster, while I fed the beast with my silence. And now, 42 years later, lying in that empty bed, looking at the bird in the water stain on the ceiling, I ask myself, what is a dedicated life worth? $1,000, according to the will. But something told me that Elizabeth, in the end, had seen the mistake. 3 months before dying, she had seen who her son really was, and she had done something about it. I just needed to find out what. The team of appraisers arrived Tuesday morning exactly at 9. 3 men in white coats and clipboards, accompanied by Michael and Tiffany, who entered my house like polite invaders. I was drinking coffee in the kitchen when I heard a key turning in the lock. My key, the one I had given Michael years ago for emergencies. He had never used it until now, and now he used it without even ringing the doorbell. "Good morning, Dad." His voice echoed down the hall with that fake cheerfulness of a door-to-door salesman. I brought the appraisers I told you about. It was not a visit. It was a territorial invasion. I got up slowly from the table, smoothing the apron I had used since the 90s. Faded blue plaid, with a patch on the pocket I had sewn myself. I walked to the living room and found the three men already measuring walls, photographing furniture, writing down numbers I could not understand. Solid mahogany original hardware, Louis XV style. One of them, the oldest with a gray mustache, spoke while running his hand over the display cabinet that had belonged to my great-grandmother. Excellent condition. The antique market is paying well for pieces like this. Tiffany was sitting on my sofa, scrolling on her phone, legs crossed, as if she owned the house. She wore a velvet outfit, the kind that costs more than my entire pension from when I helped Elizabeth. "Dad, you do not mind if I grab a juice from the fridge, right?" She did not wait for an answer. She got up and went straight to the kitchen, opening cabinets, rummaging as if looking for something beyond juice. Michael pulled me to the corner of the living room, away from the appraisers. "Dad, stay calm. They are just cataloging. We are not taking anything today." The tone was condescending, the kind you use with a stubborn child. "But you need to understand. Mom left me the estate. These furniture, these old things are part of the estate. These furniture belong to my family." My voice came out firmer than I expected. The sideboard was Grandma Edith. The cabinet was great, Grandma Clara the chandelier. "And Mom paid for the remodeling of this house when we got married," Michael interrupted. "Technically, everything here was acquired during the marriage, which means community property. And since she was the provider, he left the phrase hanging as if the rest was too obvious to explain. Provider. That word again, as if 42 years holding things up did not count as providing. The appraiser with the mustache approached, holding the rosewood sideboard with almost religious reverence. "Sir, this piece here is rare. American rosewood, probably from the 40s. Original hardware, brass handles. It is valued at least $4,000 in specialized auctions." $4,000. Grandma Edith had received that sideboard as a wedding gift. My mother kept hand-embroidered linen napkins inside. I kept family photographs in a secret drawer only I knew about. "Excellent." Michael clapped, rubbing his hands like someone closing a good deal. "Write it down. That goes straight to Sotheby." Sotheby. My grandfather, who was a carpenter and died without knowing how to read, would have the furniture he built with his own hands sold in an international auction house. And this chandelier, another appraiser pointed to the Austrian crystal chandelier in the dining room. Authentic Swarovski crystal, 120 years old, 15 original pendants. Estimated value between $3,000 and $5,000, depending on the buyer. My mother had saved 3 years to buy that chandelier. It was her dream to have something fine in the house. She died without ever dining under it. She passed away 2 months before installation. I lit that chandelier every Sunday and pretended she was there sitting at the head of the table, smiling proudly. That goes too. Tiffany appeared with a glass of orange juice, giving her opinion as if she had the right. "We will buy you a modern lamp, Dad. LED energy saving. Much more practical. Practical, efficient, modern. Words that erase history." The appraisers continued through the house like ants cataloging a colony. They photographed the bedroom vanity it came from Sweden, which my father had given as a wedding gift to my mother. They measured the Venetian mirror in the hallway, an inheritance from an aunt I never met, but whose story my mother told every time we passed in front of it. They even appraised the wall clock in the kitchen, the pendulum one that marked the hours with a metallic sound that calmed me during sleepless nights. In total, this should easily bring $25,000 to $30,000, the main appraiser announced after 2 hours of inventory. Guaranteed market. People pay good money for other people's sentimental memories. Other people, sentimental memories, as if mine were worth nothing. Michael signed the appraisal papers with a Mont Blanc pen, another new purchase with his dead mother money. He put the copies in his executive portfolio and turned to me with a smile that was supposed to look reassuring, but only looked predatory. Dad, next week I will send a truck to pick up the pieces. I leave you the basic furniture, bed, sofa, table, the essentials. He touched my shoulder, and it took all my self-control not to pull away. And with the money from the sale, I'm going to deposit $500 a month in your account, besides the $1,000 Mom left. See? You're going to have plenty of money. $500 a month. He was going to sell $30,000 in memories and give me $500 monthly as charity. And there is one more thing. Tiffany approached, holding a silver picture frame from the bookshelf. It was our wedding photo, Elizabeth and I, young and smiling, full of future ahead. This is sterling silver, 1925. Right, Dad? Must be worth about $700. She began to take the photo out of the frame. Something inside me broke. No. My voice came out low but firm like reinforced concrete. Tiffany stopped the photo still in her hand, looking at me with surprise, as if she did not expect furniture to speak. What do you mean? No, Dad. Michael frowned. They are not taking this. I snatched the picture frame from Tiffany's hands with a quick movement that surprised even me. Not Grandma Edith's sideboard, not my mother's chandelier, nothing that holds my family history. Dad, you are being irrational. Irrational? My voice rose for the first time in 42 years of marriage and 20 years of early widowerhood. Irrational is you two entering my house without permission. Irrational is inventing that you have rights over things that are mine by blood, inheritance not by notarized paper. The silence that fell was heavy, like molten lead. The appraisers exchanged uncomfortable looks. One of them began to pack his clipboard, signaling he wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. Michael took a step forward, jaw clenched, eyes narrowed. I recognized that expression. It was the same one Elizabeth wore when contradicted, the same one that preceded shouts, fists on the table slammed doors. Are you going to obey me? He spoke slowly, every word weighing a ton. Because I am the owner of this estate, and if you do not cooperate, I have very good lawyers who are going to prove in court that these furniture pieces are part of Mom assets. Then prove it. I heard my own voice, but it seemed to come from another person, a person tired of being trampled. Go to court, bring your lawyers, but until then, nothing leaves this house without my authorization, and I do not authorize it. Tiffany snorted, rolling her eyes. Michael, let us go. Let your dad have his sick attachment to his old things. We will fix it with Mr. Harrison. Harrison? They left, slamming the door. The appraisers followed quickly, relieved to escape the battlefield. I remained alone in the living room, still holding the silver picture frame, shaking from head to toe. Not from fear, from rage. 42 years swallowing insults, accepting crumbs, being the exemplary man who never complained. But there was a limit, and they had just crossed it. That same afternoon, Mrs. Patterson appeared at my door with a thermos of coffee and that determination of someone who does not accept no for an answer. She was 70 years old, white hair cut short, red frame glasses, and an upright posture that defied gravity and time. I saw the circus they set up here this morning. She entered without ceremony, went straight to the kitchen, and poured 2 cups of coffee. 3 men in lab coats, your son leaving with a face like he bit a lemon. Tell me. And I told her everything. The appraisers, the furniture, the humiliation of seeing my own history quoted like flea market merchandise. Mrs. Patterson listened in absolute silence, nodding at the right moments, her eyes alert behind the thick glasses. When I finished, she took off her glasses. She cleaned them with the hem of her blouse. A habit I already knew meant she was processing important information, and looked at me seriously. William, there is something very strange in this whole story. Very strange. She drummed her fingers on the table, thinking. I was a lawyer specializing in family law for 40 years. I have seen everything. Spouses hiding assets, children forging wills, couples being manipulated. But this, she pointed at me, this smells of coercion and financial abuse. But the will was read by Mr. Harrison. It is legitimate. It was read. Mrs. Patterson got up. She began to walk around the kitchen, as she used to do in court, when building a line of reasoning. I did not say it was read completely. What do you mean? Tell me something. Was your wife the type of woman who would leave her husband of 42 years destitute like that? I thought of Elizabeth. She was many things. Absent a workaholic, sometimes insensitive, but completely unfair? No. She knew how much I had sacrificed. She had said it that night after I saved the development. You are the foundation of everything. No, I answered, my voice coming out firmer. She was not. Then why would she leave you only $1,000? Mrs. Patterson hit the table, making the cups clatter. It makes no sense. Unless? Unless what? Unless there is something else in that will? A conditional clause, a second page, an addendum that Mr. Harrison did not read in front of your son. My heart raced. The phrase the lawyer had said in the hallway came back to my mind like lightning. Do not sign anything without talking to me first. Nothing. He told me not to sign anything. I murmured more to myself than to Mrs. Patterson. Who said? Mr. Harrison. After the reading of the will, he pulled me aside in the hallway and told me not to sign anything without talking to him first. Mrs. Patterson clapped once loud, like someone who had just solved a puzzle. There it is. I knew it. She took my hand with that surprising strength of someone who spent a life closing deals and unmasking lies. William, that man knows something you do not know, and neither does your son. That is why the insistence on making you sign papers, sell the house, put you in an apartment. They want to neutralize you before you find out. Find out what? That we will only know by talking to Mr. Harrison. Now. Mrs. Patterson was already picking up the phone. I tried to protest to say it was late, that we could wait until tomorrow. But Mrs. Patterson was not a woman who waited when she smelled injustice. She called the office, identified herself as Attorney Carmen Patterson, legal advisor to Mr. William Hernandez, a half-truth she transformed into established fact, and demanded an urgent meeting. 20 minutes later, we were in her car, heading downtown. Mr. Harrison's office was empty at that hour, almost 6 in the evening. The receptionist had already left, but he was waiting for us personally, at the door jacket thrown over his shoulder. Tie loosened the face of someone who had spent all day in exhausting hearings. Mr. William. He shook my hand with both of his, a gesture that conveyed urgency and concern. I hoped you would come. Please come in. He greeted Mrs. Patterson with the respect of someone recognizing a colleague. He took us to the conference room, closed the door carefully, and before sitting down verified that the windows were well closed, as if he were about to reveal a state secret. Mr. William, I'm going to be direct because we have no time to lose. Mr. Harrison opened a locked drawer from which he took a folder, sealed with a notary stamp. Your wife came to see me 3 months before passing away. She discovered something about your son, something serious. The air left my lungs. What did she discover? Mr. Harrison opened the folder with precise movements. Inside were documents, bank statements, copies of contracts, and my God, photographs. Michael has been embezzling money from the company for at least 5 years. He spread the documents on the table like a detective presenting evidence of a crime. Fake contracts with phantom suppliers, altered invoices, transfers to shell accounts. He diverted approximately $4 million. $4 million. Mrs. Patterson picked up one of the statements, ran her finger down the line of numbers, whistled softly. This is criminal speculation document. Forgery, money laundering. Exactly. Mr. Harrison took off his glasses, rubbed his tired eyes. Elizabeth was devastated when she found out. She hired an independent auditor and confirmed everything. She thought about reporting him to the police, but she could not. It was her son, her only son. So what did she do? My voice came out shaky. She changed the will. Mr. Harrison took a sealed envelope from the folder. My name was written on the front with Elizabeth's shaky handwriting. The writing that had worsened in her last months, but not a simple will. She created a conditional clause. Smart, Very smart. Mrs. Patterson leaned forward, smelling the legal strategy. What kind of clause? A behavior clause. Mr. Harrison opened the envelope, revealing 2 typed pages. In the first reading, I only read the first page, the one that left $1,000 to Mr. William, and the rest to Michael. But there is a second page, a page that can only be read if certain conditions are met. What conditions? I asked, barely able to breathe. The clause says the following. If my son Michael demonstrates within 30 days following my death undignified, disrespectful, or abusive behavior towards his father William, as documented by the testimony of the executor of the will, the entire inheritance I leave him shall revert completely to him, allocating it to my son, in this case, only the symbolic sum of $1,000, the same amount I initially assigned to his father. The silence that fell over that room was so heavy I could hear my own heart beating out of rhythm. Elizabeth did this. I could barely form the words. She did it, and she named me executor of the will, with powers to document Michael's behavior during this 30-day period. Cameras, recordings, witnesses, everything is valid. Mr. Harrison slid a small device across the table, a digital recorder. Your mother asked me to install security cameras in the house months ago connected to my server. The reading of the will where he mocked you. Today, meeting with the appraisers who invaded your house. Mrs. Patterson picked up the recorder, her eyes shining with that satisfaction of a lawyer who had just found the definitive evidence. How many days have passed? 23. Mr. Harrison looked at me with intensity. 7 days remaining. William, 7 days to document your son's character. He gathered the documents, and from what I have seen so far, he closed the folder with a definitive gesture. I think we already have more than enough material. I looked at that folder. Inside was a redemption, the proof that I was not invisible, that my sacrifice had not been in vain, that Elizabeth, in the end, had seen the truth. But there was also my son's sentence, and as much as he deserved it, as much as he had humiliated and disrespected me, he was still my son, and that hurt more than any inheritance could heal. Mrs. Patterson made chamomile tea when we returned home. She said it was to calm the nerves, but I think it was more to have something concrete to do while I processed the bomb that had just exploded in my life. I sat in the same kitchen chair where I had drunk coffee 1,000 mornings in a row, where I had helped Michael with homework, where I had cried hidden when Elizabeth forgot my birthday. And now I discovered that in the end she had tried to fix everything, or destroy everything depending on the angle. You need to understand something, William. Mrs. Patterson put the hot cup between my hands. Elizabeth did not do this out of cruelty. She did it for justice, and more importantly, she gave you the power of choice. What choice? To leave my son in poverty. $1,000 is not poverty. It is a choice. She pulled her chair closer to mine. She held my face with both hands, forcing me to look at her. Listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you, because it is important. You are not destroying your son. He destroyed himself when he chose to steal from his mother, humiliate his father, and think he would get away with it. But he is my son, and you are his father, not his doormat. Being a father is not accepting abuse. Being a father is not allowing your son to become a monster without consequences. Sometimes the greatest proof of love is letting someone fall so they learn to get up alone. I drank the tea in silence, feeling the hot liquid descend and warm the frozen void that had settled in my chest. Mrs. Patterson was right. I knew it. But knowing did not make the decision less painful. Mr. Harrison said 7 days remain. I spoke more to myself. 7 days until the clause activates. What happens if they find out? They will not find out. Mrs. Patterson crossed her arms. Strategist mode activated. You are going to act normal. If Michael calls answer. If he shows up here, receive him. Let him continue hanging himself with his own rope. I do not know if I can pretend. You do not need to pretend. Just be yourself, the man who survived 42 years of invisibility without losing his dignity. Mrs. Patterson squeezed my hand. If at any moment you waver, call me, no matter what time. She slept in the guest room that night. She said it was because it was too late to drive, but I knew it was to keep me company to make sure I did not fall apart alone with the weight of that truth. The following days were the strangest of my life. Michael called twice, one to say he had solved the furniture problem with the lawyer and I did not need to worry, another to let me know he had found a perfect apartment for me in a community for seniors. You have a recreation room, Dad, and craft classes. You will love it. Crafts. As if I were a senile old man who only served to pass time with his hands. I swallowed my rage, thanked him politely, and hung up. Mrs. Patterson, who was by my side, took notes in a little notebook. Day 25. Son attempts to coerce father to accept unwanted apartment. On Thursday, Tiffany showed up without warning. She brought brochures of retirement homes, sorry luxury residences for seniors, and a smile as fake as her gel nails. Dad, look how pretty. Heated pool, 24-hour nurse's cable TV room. She spread the brochures on the table like someone presenting resort options. And best of all, Michael already paid the first month you can move next week. I'm not going anywhere, Tiffany. I kept my voice calm but firm. She blinked confused, as if not processing the possibilities of receiving a no. But Dad, we already closed the deal. They are going to lose the deposit. If you do not go, then let them lose it. I went back to washing dishes, deliberately turning my back on her. I did not ask. I did not authorize. And I am not going. I felt her rage radiating against my back. She stood there a few seconds, breathing hard before picking up the brochures with rough movements. You are ungrateful. Michael only wants the best for you, and you are being ridiculous with this stubbornness. Her voice went up an octave. But that is fine. When you fall alone in this old house and lie on the floor for days without anyone helping, you do not come crying. She slammed the door so hard that the wall clock stopped for a few seconds before working again. Mrs. Patterson, who had listened to everything from the bedroom, appeared with her phone in hand. Veiled. Threat. Psychological coercion. Attempt. Of abandonment. Of elderly person? She smiled with grim satisfaction. Mr. Harrison is going to love this. On Saturday, with 3 days remaining for the deadline, Michael showed up with papers. Many papers. They were powers of attorney authorizations, property transfers, everything disguised in complicated legal language that a common person would not understand. Dad, I need you to sign these, just inventory paperwork. He put the documents in front of me, offering an expensive pen. Mister. Harrison sent them civil registry stuff, you know how it is. I took the papers, read slowly, every line, every paragraph. And there, hidden on page 3, under the innocent title, Assignment of Hereditary Rights, was the trap. I would be renouncing any future claim on Elizabeth Estate. Mr. Harrison sent this. I looked him in the eye. Yes, I spoke with him yesterday. A lie. Mr. Harrison had called me last night to say that Michael had tried to schedule an appointment, but had invented an excuse of being out of town. I'm going to read it carefully, and then I sign. I put the papers away. Dad, it is urgent. It needs to be today to present it on Monday. Then it will have to wait until Monday. I closed the folder, crossed my arms. I do not sign anything without reading it well. I saw his jaw lock, his nostrils flare. His eyes darken in that way Elizabeth got when she was contradicted. You are challenging me? His voice came out low, dangerous. I am exercising my right to read what I sign. Do you know what your problem is? Michael got up abruptly, the chair scraping the floor. You never knew your place. You always believed you had the right to have an opinion, to decide to have a voice. But the truth is, you were always that, nothing more. Elizabeth husband. And now that she is dead, you are nothing. Every word was a precise slap. Nothing, he repeated, savoring the cruelty. Do you think you built something? That you helped with something? You were the luxury housekeeper, Dad, the one who cooked, cleaned, and stayed silent, while real men brought the money. I remained still. Not even Mrs. Patterson, who had come down when she heard the argument, dared to interfere. So I am going to tell you in a way even you understand. Michael leaned close to my face. Either you sign those papers, or I sue you for obstruction of probate proceedings. And believe me, I have very, very good lawyers. Lawyers who are going to prove that you do not have mental capacity to manage assets. They are going to commit you by force if necessary. He leaned even closer. You are going to end your days drooling in a third-rate nursing home, taking controlled medications and watching soap operas. Is that what you want? The silence that followed was cutting like broken glass. Then for the first time in 67 years, I smiled at a threat. I smiled because I knew what he did not know. I smiled because only 3 days remained. I smiled because every word of that speech was being recorded by the device Mr. Harrison had discreetly installed in the living room lamp. Do you know what, Michael? My voice came out calm, almost gentle. You are absolutely right. I never knew what my place was because my place was never under anyone's feet. I took the papers and tore them slowly, one by one. Now get out of my house and only come back when you learn that respect is not inherited. It is earned. Michael left my house that Saturday with a hatred so palpable I could taste the bitterness of it in the air. This time he did not slam the door. He just left in silence, and that silence was much more terrifying than any scream. Tiffany was waiting for him in the car, looking at her phone. I saw through the window when he got in, hit the steering wheel twice, and sped off tires, screeching on the asphalt. She turned to look at my house, and even from the distance I could see the smile. It was not a smile of victory. It was a smile of someone who was planning something. They are going to come back. Mrs. Patterson was by my side, watching the car disappear around the corner, and they are going to come back with everything. I know. 3 days remaining, William. 3 days until the deadline of the clause. Can you hold on? I looked at that woman I barely knew 2 weeks ago and who was now my only real ally in this silent war. Mrs. Patterson had lit a light in a corridor I thought ended in complete darkness. I am going to hold on. My voice came out firmer than I felt, because I have no choice. But in reality, for the first time in a long time, I did have a choice, and I was choosing not to bow. That same night, Mr. Harrison appeared discreetly through the back door. He brought a laptop and a serious expression that made his face look like a familiar crime scene. William, I need you to see this. He opened the computer on the kitchen table, adjusted his glasses, and pressed play. The screen showed my living room, a discreet angle, captured by the hidden camera in the lamp. And there was Michael, in high definition, saying every poisonous word he had spat hours before. You were the luxury housekeeper, Dad, the one who cooked, cleaned, and stayed silent while real men brought the money. Hearing it a second time did not hurt less. But this time there was a layer of distance, as if I were watching someone else's story, a man who had been humiliated too long. I also have recordings of the reading of the will, the meeting with the appraiser's Tiffany visit with the nursing home brochures. Mr. Harrison ran his fingers over the trackpad, showing folder after folder of audio and video files. 27 days of documentation, 27 days of your son proving exactly the type of character your wife feared he had. Elizabeth knew. She knew. Mr. Harrison closed the laptop carefully like someone closing a coffin. The financial diversions were the straw that broke the camel back. But Elizabeth had been observing her son's behavior for years. The arrogance, the contempt, the lack of empathy. She told me something I will never forget. Counselor, I raised a monster, and now I need to ensure that monster does not destroy the only person who was always by my side. Tears came without asking permission. They were not tears of sadness. They were tears of validation, of finally being seen by someone who mattered. Mrs. Patterson hugged my shoulders, squeezed hard. 3 days remaining. Mr. Harrison put the laptop in his bag. Monday. 30 days will have passed since Elizabeth's death. I've called a new meeting at the office for a supplementary reading of the will. Michael. He does not know what it is about, but he is going to attend. I sent the official summons through the civil registry. He has no choice. And if he suspects? The lawyer allowed himself a discreet smile. He thinks this meeting is for you to finally sign the inheritance waivers. I left it implied in the summons. He is going to arrive confident, victorious, and he is going to leave destroyed. Mrs. Patterson completed without a shred of pity in her voice. Sunday, the day before the final meeting, the house was strangely silent. Neither Michael nor Tiffany made contact. No calls, no surprise visits, nothing. It was the calm before the storm, and I could feel the electricity in the air. I spent the day organizing the house, not because I needed to. The house was spotless, but because I needed to do something with my hands to not go crazy with anxiety. I was polishing Grandma Edith's sideboard for the third time when I realized I was not just cleaning wood, I was saying goodbye. Because regardless of what happened tomorrow, nothing would ever be the same again. Either I would lose my son definitely, or he would learn a lesson so hard that maybe he would never forgive me for applying it. Which could be worse. The conference room was exactly as I remembered it. Varnished mahogany table leather chairs. Large windows showing the city down there. Small, distant, oblivious to the drama that was about to unfold inside. Michael threw himself into a chair with that posture of master of the universe. Legs open, arms extended over the back of the chair next to him. Tiffany sat next to him, crossed her legs, and began scrolling on her phone, as if this was just another boring meeting she attended out of obligation. Mrs. Patterson positioned herself strategically by my side. Mr. Harrison went to the door. He closed it with a discreet click that made Michael raise an eyebrow, but he said nothing. Then he returned to his chair, opened that same worn brown folder, and adjusted his glasses with meticulous movements. Well, Michael slapped his thighs. Impatient, let us finish this. I brought new documents for my dad to sign, simpler this time without complicated legal jargon. He pushed a folder across the table in my direction. Actually, Mr. Michael, we are not going to need those documents. Mr. Harrison did not even look at the folder. Today's meeting has a different purpose. Silence. Michael blinked, confused. Tiffany lowered her phone. What do you mean by different purpose? Her voice had lost some of its arrogance. We are here for the supplementary reading of your mother will. Mr. Harrison opened the folder. He took out the same envelope I had seen days ago. There was a second page that was not read in the first meeting. For legal and contractual reasons, it could only be revealed after 30 full days had passed since her passing. I saw the color drain from Michael's face. Not completely, not yet, but enough for him to know something was wrong. Second page. What is this about? He leaned forward, trying to look merely curious. But I saw the tension in his shoulders. Why was I not supposed to know? Mr. Harrison responded with that professional calm of someone who had seen many storms. Your mother registered this additional clause 3 months before passing away, with express instructions that it only be revealed after a period of observation. Observation of what? Tiffany had leaned forward too, her acrylic nails tapping nervously on the table. Of the behavior of Mr. Michael Hernandez towards his father. The temperature of the room dropped 10 degrees. Michael let out a short, uncomfortable laugh. Behavior? What the hell does that mean? Mr. Harrison did not answer. He just began to read, his voice firm and clear without emotion. Additional clause to the last will and testament of Elizabeth Hernandez. Considering that I have reasons to believe that my son might not treat his father with the respect and dignity he deserves after my passing, I establish the following. If it is proven through appropriate documentation gathered by the executor of the will that Michael Hernandez demonstrated undignified, disrespectful, coercive, or abusive behavior towards William Hernandez within 30 days following my death, the entire inheritance I leave him shall revert completely to my husband. Deafening silence. To my son in this case shall correspond solely the symbolic sum of $1,000. The same that I initially assigned to his father, as a reminder that respect and dignity are not inherited they are earned. Michael jumped to his feet, the chair almost tipping backward. "This is ridiculous!" The scream echoed off the walls. "This cannot be legal. It cannot be valid. It is completely legal." Mrs. Patterson spoke for the first time, her lawyer voice cutting the air like a sharp blade. "Wills can contain conditional clauses, and this was drafted, executed, and registered before a notary, with all necessary formalities. Undignified behavior." Michael ran his hands through his hair. He was beginning to sweat. Who defines what is undignified behavior? That is too subjective. Not when there is documentation. Mr. Harrison turned on the laptop that was on the table. "According to instructions left by your mother, I was named executor of the will, with powers to observe and document your interactions with Mr. William during the 30-day period. You spied on me." Michael's voice went up an octave. "Documented?" Mr. Harrison corrected, pressing play. The first scene that appeared on the screen was from the reading of the will. Michael laughing, mocking the $1,000 they left me. The words echoed through the room again, now amplified by the speakers. 1,000? That does not even cover Tiffany manicure appointments. Tiffany sank into her chair, pale. The video continued. The meeting with the appraisers, Michael cataloging my furniture like merchandise, Tiffany visit with the nursing home brochures, and finally the scene from Saturday. Michael calling me luxury housekeeper, saying I was nothing threatening to have me committed by force. Every word, every gesture, every expression of contempt documented in high definition. When the video ended, Michael was white as paper. Tiffany had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide open. 27 days of documentation. Mr. Harrison closed the laptop. 27 days of behavior that characterizes according to legal analysis I requested from 3 independent specialists: psychological abuse, coercion attempt, of misappropriation of assets, and threat of illegal imprisonment. I was angry. People say things when they are angry. Michael was desperate, now his hands shaking. That cannot count. I did not know you were recording me. Exactly. Mrs. Patterson got up, approached the table with the posture of the prosecutor. She once was. You did not know. So you revealed who you really are when you think no one is watching. And that is what your mother wanted to discover. Not the son who pretended to be in front of her, but the man he had become when he thought there were no consequences. Michael turned to me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw real panic in his eyes. Dad, you are not going to allow this to happen, right? I am your son. I was just stressed by Mom death. You know how it is? It was not personal. He was begging now, his voice breaking. Please, you cannot do this to me. I looked at that 40-year-old man, sweating cold, desperate pleading, and I did not see my son. I saw a stranger who had learned all the wrong lessons in life. You are right, Michael. I cannot do this to you. My voice came out calm, serene. You did it to yourself. No. He hit the table. I am going to sue. I am going to annul this ridiculous will. I have rights. I am an only child. You can try. Mr. Harrison gathered the documents with irritating tranquility. But you are going to lose, and you are going to spend the $1,000 you will have left on legal fees. Your decision. Tiffany got up, grabbing her bag. Michael, let us go. We are going to fix it with other lawyers. Real lawyers. She threw a poisonous look at Mr. Harrison, but Michael did not move. He was looking at me with an expression that oscillated between hatred and disbelief, as if he could not process that the invisible man he had trampled all his life had just flipped the game. How many years, Dad? His voice came out broken. How many years did you spend waiting for this? Planning to destroy me? I did not plan anything, Michael. Your mother planned. I just let you show who you really are. I got up, grabbed my briefcase. And if it serves as consolation, I hope those $1,000 teach you more about dignity than $8 million ever would have. I walked towards the door. Mrs. Patterson unlocked it. She opened it for me. Before leaving, I turned one last time. Michael was still sitting, head in his hands. Tiffany was on the phone, probably already calling lawyers, calculating if there was still any way to save the money, and I felt nothing. Neither joy for the victory, nor sadness for the loss. Just a strange emptiness where a father love should have been. Maybe that was what it meant to finally be free. The 3 months following that morning in Mr. Harrison's office were an emotional roller coaster I was not prepared for. Michael tried to challenge the will as promised. He hired a lawyer who promised him miracles in exchange for his last savings. But Mr. Harrison was right. They had no case. The clause was solid, the documentation irrefutable, and 3 independent experts confirmed that the recorded behavior characterized psychological abuse. The judge, a woman with gray hair with the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much family ingratitude, denied the appeal in the first instance. Michael appealed, lost again. It cost him exactly $14,700 in legal fees. He had $300 left from what his mother had left him. Tiffany abandoned him the second week after the court decision. There was no farewell letter, there was no drama. She simply packed her suitcases while he was at the lawyer office, took the jewelry he had given her the car that was in her name, and disappeared. She left a note stuck to the refrigerator with 3 words. It was fun while it lasted. I found out about this through Mrs. Patterson, who found out from the gossip of the building where Michael lived, who coincidentally was the cousin of one of her former clients. Female information networks are more efficient than any intelligence service. I felt neither pity nor joy, just a cold realization. He had chosen a woman who loved him for what he had not, for who he was. And when the having ran out, the being was not enough. As for me, for the first time in 67 years, I needed to discover who I was, when I was not being defined by someone else. I was no longer Elizabeth husband. I was no longer Michael father. I was just William. And William needed to reinvent himself. The first thing I did was renovate the house, not because I needed to, the structure was solid, but because I needed it. I hired a young designer, a girl with big glasses and hair dyed electric blue, who listened to me for 3 hours before drawing a single line. You want to transform memories into new beginnings? She had said, looking at the rooms with eyes that saw possibilities. Let us do it. We painted the walls, no more beige and white, the colors Elizabeth preferred, because they were neutral and increased property value. I chose cobalt blue for the living room, a deep blue that reminded me of the ocean I had never seen up close. Gold for the trim frames, doorknobs, baseboards. The designer suggested they made all the difference. The kitchen received Portuguese tiles in yellow and orange tones, colors that seemed to hold sun inside the house, even on cloudy days. Grandma Edith's sideboard stayed in the same place, but now restored, refinished, shining with renewed dignity. My mother's chandelier was cleaned, piece by piece, every crystal pendant polished until it reflected light like little stars. And where our wedding portrait used to hang Elizabeth and I, young and full of illusions, I put a photograph of myself at 25 before marriage, when I still dreamed of being an architect. That young man in the portrait had bright eyes. I had forgotten I was once like that. At 67, I enrolled in the open program at the University for Seniors, not to complete the architecture degree. That dream had been left behind, and that was fine. But I took a course in art history, another in urban gardening, and a third on civil rights that Mrs. Patterson insisted I take. You never know when you are going to need it, she had said with that knowing smile. I made real friendships, not the superficial friendships of a businesswoman husband where you smiled at dinners and never revealed anything true, but friendships of people who recognized themselves in pain and overcoming. Men like me who had spent decades being invisible and were learning to occupy space. Henry's 71 widower of a doctor who cheated on him openly and left half the inheritance to her lover. Robert, 65, divorced after discovering his wife had a second family in another city. James, 69, who never married, because he took care of his sick father until he died, and when he was finally free, he was too old to start. We met every Tuesday afternoon in my cobalt blue living room. We drank tea in cups I had bought especially for this fine porcelain with gold details, and told our stories. We laughed, we cried. We reconstructed our narratives in a way that made sense to us, not to the women who defined us. I planted a garden in the backyard. Roses, jasmine, lavender flowers that Elizabeth never allowed because they attract bees and require work. Now the bees came and the work was mine. And there was something deeply satisfying about getting hands dirty and seeing something beautiful grow from my care. 6 months after the meeting in Mr. Harrison's office, Michael appeared. He did not warn he was coming. He just rang the doorbell on a Saturday morning, and when I opened the door, I almost did not recognize him. He had lost weight. His beard was unshaven. His clothes were simple, a faded t-shirt, worn jeans. Nothing like the Italian suits and leather shoes. "Hi, Dad." His voice came out hoarse as if he had not used it much lately. Michael. I did not invite him in, not yet. We stood there on the threshold, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us like old gum. "Hey." He swallowed hard. "I needed to talk to you." "Then talk." He looked around the empty street, his feet anywhere but at me. "I got a job at an accounting firm, administrative assistant, minimum wage and a half." A pause. "It is humiliating. Me, who was a company director, now I file papers and make coffee for people who earn less than what I used to spend on meals." Wait, I was not going to make it easy for him. "It is honest." He took a deep breath. "And at the end of the day, when I lie in bed in the tiny apartment I share with 2 other guys, at least, I sleep without feeling like I stole from someone. Something moved in my chest, small, cautious. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe it was the beginning of something similar. Why did you come here, Michael?" Finally he looked at me, and I saw in his eyes something I had never seen before, genuine shame. "Because I spent 6 months blaming you, blaming Mom, blaming the world, and this morning I woke up and realized the only guilty one was me." His hands were shaking. "I was a horrible son, not just ungrateful, I was cruel, and you did not deserve any of that." Tears began to roll down his face. They were not manipulative tears. I already knew those. These were tears of someone who finally saw the monster in the mirror. I did not come to ask for forgiveness, because I know I do not deserve it. And I did not come to ask for money, because I learned that money I did not earn is worth nothing. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "I came to say I understood. I understood the lesson, and I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to become the son you deserve to have." I remained in silence for a time that seemed eternal. Then I stepped aside. "Come in, I am going to make coffee." It was not complete forgiveness. It was not immediate reconciliation, but it was a door opening slowly, cautiously. Because in the end I discovered that justice is not about revenge, it is about restoration. And sometimes restoring means giving someone the chance to rebuild who they are, even if it hurts, even if it is scary, even if you are never father and son like before, because that before was broken from the start. 2 years have passed since that morning when Michael appeared at my door. 2 years that taught me that rebuilding bridges is slow, delicate work that requires patience from both sides. Michael did not become the perfect son of fairy tales. He did not move back in with me. He does not call every day. He does not pretend that years of cruelty can be erased with some apologies. But he shows up once a week sometimes. 2, always bringing something simple. Bread from the bakery. I like flowers from the market. Or simply his presence. We talk for real now. Not those superficial conversations of how are you followed by fine, but real conversations, where he tells me about work. They promoted him to financial analyst. He earns enough now to have his own apartment, small, but his. And I tell him about my classes, my gardening projects, the friends who became my new family. Once he looked at the cobalt blue wall of the living room and said, "It looks pretty. I never imagined you liked these vibrant colors." Neither did I answered, pouring the coffee. I spent 42 years without knowing who I was, beyond husband and father. I am discovering it, little by little. He stayed quiet a moment, stirring the sugar in his coffee with slow movements. I'm sorry for stealing that from you. His voice came out small. You did not steal Michael. I gave it away. That is the difference. I sat in the armchair opposite the one that is now my favorite. Emerald green velvet bought in a vintage furniture store. I learned that no one can make us invisible without our permission. I chose to disappear because I thought that was what a good husband, a good father did. I was wrong. It was the most honest conversation we had had until then. On my 70th birthday, Michael had already turned 42. He showed up with a carefully wrapped gift. When I opened it, I found a rosewood picture frame clearly handmade with simple but careful carvings. I made it in a woodworking class, he explained, blushing slightly. I thought, well, you always valued things that carry history, so I wanted to start creating new stories. Good ones. Inside the frame was a photo of us taken 3 weeks before in the garden. Me watering the lavender, him in the background helping to prune the roses. Both smiling. Not posed smiles, real smiles. The kind that happens when you are simply living a good moment. Thank you, son. And this time, the word son did not hurt. Mrs. Patterson continued to be my anchor. We had dinner together at least twice a week, alternating between my house and hers. She had started dating a 75-year-old widower whom she met on a Caribbean cruise we went on together. Something I would never have done alone, but that Mrs. Patterson insisted we needed to experience. William, we spent all our lives taking care of everyone. It is time to take care of ourselves. She was right. The cruise was liberating. Seeing the ocean for the first time at 68 made me understand how many things I had stopped doing while I was busy being useful to others. The Tuesday friends, Henry Robert and James, became confidants, brothers I chose. Henry had opened a small woodworking shop with the inheritance he won in court. Robert had returned to painting something he abandoned in his 20s, when his wife said art did not pay the bills. James had adopted 3 cats and was finally taking the trip through Europe he had always dreamed of. We were all blooming at an age when society says we should be withering. Mr. Harrison also became a friend. I discovered he was a widower, had lost his wife to the same cancer that took Elizabeth. We understood each other in a silent way, as people who have survived deep losses can understand. One afternoon, drinking coffee, he told me that Elizabeth had cried the day she discovered Michael embezzlement. She blamed herself, saying she had raised a son who valued money more than character because she herself had spent her life chasing money. The clause in the will was not revenge, William. It was a mother's last attempt to save her son, to shake him hard enough to wake him up. Did it work? I said, thinking of the Michael of today. Different from the arrogant man who pushed me at the funeral. It hurt, but it worked. If this story touched something in you, if you recognized in William the silent strength that many of us do not know we have, leave your comment below. Tell me where you are watching us from. And more importantly, what lesson did you take from this story? Because in the end, this is not just William's story. It is the story of every man who was called just. Just a housekeeper, just a father, just a husband. And one day discovered there is no just when you talk about a man who chooses not to disappear anymore. Like this video, if you believe it is never too late to start over. Subscribe to Grandpa Advice for more stories of real men facing real challenges and finding strength they did not know they had. And remember, respect is not inherited, it is earned. But dignity, you already have it, you just need to remember it.